Hello, and welcome back to There You Go with Bryan. You know, there's a million stories in every cemetery. Let's check one of them out. It's the story of the Graceland Wolff.
Obviously, this is not your typical tomb. There's a lot going on here. We're butted up on the far north side of Graceland Cemetery. Right out there beyond the fence is Montrose. And well, let me just get into this because there's a lot of stuff here, but I'm going to try to condense this. What an interesting story, though. And yes, there's a backstory on that vent up there. You don't see that very often. The Wolff family tomb, that's where we're at right here in Graceland Cemetery. The Wolff family came to the U.S. in May of 1854, when Ludwig Sr. was a young man of just 18. Their arrival was followed by a truly devastating series of losses. I mean, this is just heartbreaking. Ludwig Sr. was the oldest of 8 siblings who immigrated to the United States with their parents. And shortly after they reached New York City, their mother and 3 brothers died. The surviving family members made it to Chicago and then lost their father in July of the same year. This left Ludwig Sr. in charge of his surviving 2 brothers and 2 younger sisters. He's only 18 years old at this time. Fortunately for the remaining members of the little family, 18 years old was in those days old enough to have learned a trade, and young Ludwig Sr. was a coppersmith. He worked at several different jobs, including a 3-month stint on a farm, and though we have no insight into his inner life, he would appear to be very driven and very hardworking. In spite of everything that had happened to him, within a year, Ludwig Sr. teamed up with a trained plumber, and together they established their own business in 1855. Ludwig Sr. seems to have been both determined and very lucky, for he and his partner's first job using Ludwig Sr.'s coppersmithing skills was to build a still for a local pharmacist. Ludwig Sr. ended up working on his own to build a working model of an improved still, which they then demonstrated at the United States Fair in Chicago in 1856. It was a major success. In that very same year, he married his first wife, Elizabeth, and together they had 7 children over the next almost 20 years. In business, Ludwig Sr. continued to thrive, eventually buying out his partner in 1868, though he lost about $30,000 in the Great Chicago Fire from loss of accounts. The year after her youngest child, Louis Jr., was born, Elizabeth died. Ludwig Sr. would remarry twice, with 1 child from each marriage surviving to adulthood. In all, he had 10 children. Ludwig Sr. outlived all 3 of his wives and 4 of his children. In 1910, shortly before his death, he was living in a large house with several servants. The family fortunes were secure. And in case you're wondering who is actually in this tomb, yes, you have Ludwig Sr., who outlived all 3 of his wives, but that didn't keep him from his 3 wives, because all 3 of his wives are buried here with Ludwig, and at least 3 of his daughters are buried here as well. So it's Ludwig, his 3 wives, and 3 of his daughters. His first wife Elizabeth and 2 of their daughters were originally buried in Woodson Cemetery, but were moved to the family mausoleum in Graceland. In a tragic Chicago history note, his daughter Lucille, grandchildren Willie and John Garn, and his youngest daughter and youngest child Harriet, who had accompanied her half-sister and nephews, were all killed in the Iroquois Theater fire on the 30th of December 1903. Oh, God! He lost all of those family members in a theater fire. His daughter, grandchildren Willie and John, and his youngest daughter, and the youngest child Harriet, who had accompanied. Oh God, it's heartbreaking. But I guess you can take comfort in the fact that, well, they're all together now, and he certainly did have a great deal of intestinal fortitude and tenacity to weather all of that. Now, the obvious question is, why is there an air vent on top of this tomb? Well, that's easy. Apparently, Ludwig was very fearful of being buried alive. Apparently, this was something that was a fear that people had in the 1800s. And they, very few, but you will see them around still today, they will have an air vent up there to circulate air throughout the tomb so he could get some air if he were by chance buried alive. 75 years old when he passed. And apparently, rumor has it that inside that vent there is also a bell. And there is a rope that goes from the bell down into the casket where Ludwig is resting. And there is a rope tied to his hand in case he were to wake up and he could ring the bell for help. Now, as a little side note, you know, when you have cemeteries like this, there's a lot of urban myths and little stories that go around, and some may be true. I don't know. Hard to say. Oh, there's the beautiful Graceland Cemetery lake right there. Potter Palmer is right over there with those pillars. But apparently, there was a night watchman who used to patrol the grounds here. And he said that many times when he would be here at night, he would see a large black dog walking back and forth in front of the tomb. Now, apparently, Ludwig was a dog lover, and he had a large black dog. Some people say it may have been a very large coyote, because they do have some coyotes in this area. But I don't know. You be the judge. Do you believe that Ludwig is resting here and his dog is watching over him? Well, that's going to do it for me. Sorry, I didn't mean to ramble. I sometimes when I come to these places, especially cemeteries like this that are so historic, I get a little bit swept away, and you start looking people up and saying, I wonder what that person's life was like. There's 1,000,001 stories, and there's not enough time to go through them all. I don't necessarily concentrate on, you know, cemetery vlogs, but I mean, come on out to Graceland Cemetery here, right on Clark Street. We're just a couple of blocks north of Wrigley Field. Even if you just want to come and hang out, have a picnic, they encourage it. They've got a beautiful little bridge right there. You can walk around. Some people come out here in the summer and sunbathe. Anyway, it's here for your enjoyment, and it's totally free. So make sure you check it out. That's going to do it for me. I'm Brian. We'll see you next time on the next edition of There You Go with Bryan. See you next time.
Something old, something new, something for me, something for you. It's a big, big world. Let's check it out.